accident.
They think they can beat me, but they haven't beat me yet.
The top three Republican candidates battle it out on policy and politics as West Virginia takes center stage.
In the first of our series of debates across the country, leading up to the midterms.
It all starts right now on America's election headquarters.
Welcome to the Metropolitan Theater here in Morgantown, West Virginia, and the kickoff of the 2018 midterm primary debates. Good evening. I'm Brett Baer.
And I'm Martha McCallum. Tonight you will hear from the candidates vying to take on Democrat Senator Joe Manchin in November. President Trump won big here in 2016, and Republicans believe that this seat may be ripe for the taking.
So let's meet the candidates. First, we have Congressman Evan Jenkins, representing the 3rd District of West Virginia. Then West Virginia, Attorney General Patrick Morrisey. And finally, former CEO of Massey Energy, Don Blankenship. Candidates, welcome.
So the rules of the debate are simple. Candidates will have 60 seconds to answer the questions, 30 seconds if they're given a follow-up after that question, and they also get 30 seconds if their name is mentioned by one of the other candidates.
If the candidates go over their allotted time, they will hear this. Now, we don't like to use it because some of the dogs at home think that somebody's at the door, so let's try not to use the bell, and let's get going.
We'll do the best we can. All right. Well, as you all know, the opioid epidemic has hit this country hard, and we're going to talk about that in great detail tonight. But let's get started at the top of our questions.
Congressman Jenkins, first to you. You are at the center of the stage tonight because you're leading in our latest Fox News poll in this race. Your opponents on this stage, however, call you a card-carrying member of the political establishment. You voted for the $1.3 trillion spending bill, which conservatives called a bloated betrayal, essentially. And Republicans aligned with Senator Mitch McConnell are spending money to help your campaign. So I guess the question is, how do you convince West Virginia voters that you can drain the swamp if they think you're a part of it?
Well, thank you, Brett, and thank you, Martha, and thank you to each and every one of you who are here this evening. I'm a proud West Virginian. You know, I haven't been up in the swamp very long. I took out a 38-year Democrat incumbent just a couple of years ago. I'm up in Washington actually working with President Trump. I have been fighting the establishment. I've been fighting the swamp. And what a difference an election makes. Look, we're already starting to see West Virginia turning around, working with President Trump, standing up with him. You know, I proudly endorsed President Trump in the May primary 2016, the only one up here on the stage who did that, and have been standing with him each and every day. So we are bringing real results. Yes, we're cutting taxes. Yes, we're reducing regulations. We're making a real difference in West Virginia. In fact, leading the country in a lot of ways, standing up for what we believe as West Virginians.
Congressman, thank you.
Mr. Blankenship, you were recently in prison for a year on a conviction in the UBB mine explosion case. You have blamed the Obama Justice Department and that administration's war on coal, but many of these mining families did blame you. Can you blame them if they don't think it's right for you to go from the jail cell to the United States Senate?
I don't think that's the question we need to be asking. I think the question we need to be asking is whether we can prevent Upper Big Branch from happening again. This time it happened because the government cut the air in half, and that work was finished only 8 hours before a mine that had been in existence for 17 years exploded. Basically, the government didn't blame me. They blamed the coal miners for not doing their job, which was terribly untrue. The miners had probably 400 years of experience. They did their job. Had I plea bargained during the trial, I would have been admitting that the miners did not do their job. So I couldn't do that. I faced 30 years in prison for a fake charge, and I beat all 3 of the felonies. They put me in jail because I did not stop the coal miners from telling each other that the inspectors had arrived. That's not a law that's on the books. That's the law that the Obama prosecutors made up in preparation for the trial. And the trial was incredibly violative of a person's human rights to a fair trial. They did things like You know, and in order to comply with the rule that they have to give us the documents they're going to use at trial, they gave us 1.5 million documents and told us that the documents they were going to use were in there somewhere. It's incredible. They sent me to prison for a misdemeanor. I was the only prisoner there that was a misdemeanor. It was clear from the beginning to the end that it was a fake prosecution.
But, sir, what do you say to those who say that you have made it about you? Do you accept any responsibility for the deaths of those 29 minors?
No, I'm accepting the responsibility to do everything I can to keep it from happening again. The government cut the air in half. The job was finished 8 hours before the explosion. There's not much else you can say about it. You have to have an explosive atmosphere, no matter whether you have sharp bits or dull bits or plugged water sprays or no water sprays, you have to have an explosive atmosphere. The way you prevent an explosive atmosphere is a lot of airflow. And these guys begged MSHA, i.e. the government, not to make that change. The government should apologize to them and tell them the truth.
Why didn't you insist they didn't make that change?
Because I was not aware that they were making those changes. When you have 119 coal mines, it's impossible to keep up with what every one of them are doing. The things we need to do is we need to bifurcate MSHA into a regulatory and an inspector group, investigative group like NTSB and FAA are in the aviation industry. We use maximum technology in the mines to control the atmosphere. And we also need to have a relief valve when the government's trying to make you do something that you don't want to do, and your engineers are at odds with the government's engineers. They shouldn't be able to dictate what you do.
Mr. Morsi, this is not your first attempt to get elected to Congress. You first ran in your native New Jersey, which Congressman Jenkins often mentions on the campaign trail. Joe Manchin grew up here and never left. He will surely call you a carpetbagger. So how do you counter that claim?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the opportunity that Fox News is giving us to be here tonight to show off West Virginia. We have an amazing state. And I feel very fortunate that I'm one of the folks up here who moved to the state by choice. I love West Virginia with all the fiber in my being. And that's one of the reasons why when I ran for Attorney General, I knew we needed a change. We had a 20-year incumbent who was wreaking havoc on the state of West Virginia. I knew we need a conservative fighter to go after Obama overreach and give Obama everything he had. Fortunately, I was able to win in court time after time after time against Barack Obama. If anyone raises West Virginia values with me, show me someone who's done more to go after the absolute wretched excess of the Barack Obama era. We went after it. We won the Clean Power Plan, illegal amnesty. We've been fighting for pro-life principles. We're the conservative fighter of anyone standing here tonight.
Well, we've been watching all of your commercials and your ads going after each other. And so, Congressman Jenkins, I got to ask you, I'm from New Jersey. What are New Jersey values and what's wrong with them?
Well, all you have to do is look at his ad when he ran for Congress in New Jersey. Great picture of him, his campaign logo with Jersey. And the ad said, I will stand up and fight anybody who goes against Jersey values. You know what? We need somebody representing our values. You can't change your values just because you change your zip code.
But what are Jersey values as opposed to West Virginia values?
Again, she's from New Jersey.
I'll let you define. We got two folks from Jersey here. I'll let you all talk about your Jersey values.
You said there was something wrong with them, so I'm just curious. What's wrong with them?
I'll tell you what. You know what, West Virginia?
Mr. Morsi, we'll get you in a second.
Yeah. And you know, I appreciate you being here. You know what? We do welcome. We do welcome outsiders. We love having you here. People need to be coming to West Virginia for the right reasons. You know, Patrick Morsi grew up in Jersey, made all of his living and his money and his millions of bucks lobbying in Washington, D.C., and then he went back to Jersey to run for Congress, and he did on his Jersey values theme. He came in last place in a Republican primary, then he moved back to Washington, D.C., making more money, and then he came to West Virginia, put his name on the ballot. You know, West Virginians see through that. This is not about shopping for a state for your political career. Candidly, we had that with a very well-heeled Democrat who moved to West Virginia out of the Northeast. Once they set up shop, it's tough to get them out. We welcome outsiders. We love people moving to West Virginia, but we want them coming to West Virginia for the right reasons.
I don't think you're getting an answer on your values, but let's have a response, Ms. Attorney General Morrissey.
Well, a couple things. First, I think it's very clear West Virginians want someone with conservative values. And I look up here on stage and I can say, I'm the only one on this stage who has always been a conservative. I've been strongly pro-life my entire career. Second Amendment rights. There's a reason why I'm the endorsed West Virginians for Life candidate, the Second Amendment group candidate, the conservative-backed candidate, because people know I have the conservative West Virginia values. If you look at the congressman, he actually has been very liberal. If you go Obamacare, checkbox, he supported. Hillary, he went rallied for Hillary. Nancy Pelosi, John Kerry, Planned Parenthood spending just a couple weeks ago. Evan, you should be ashamed of yourself for that outrageous vote, killing the unborn.
Congressman, your response?
Well, fortunately, Patrick's not being honest. There's not a penny in the bill that we passed to fund the federal government that's going to Planned Parenthood. If any money goes to Planned Parenthood, that's going to be the Trump administration. I actually led the charge. I've fought to defund Planned Parenthood. I have stood up for life, and as a matter of fact, the National Right to Life organization has given me a 100% voting record. You know, I'm the one that actually has a voting record. Patrick, Don, others can talk about how they will vote. 100% pro-life, 100% defending the Second Amendment with the national right to life. I will tell you, I won't allow you to challenge my West Virginia values, my proud history of fighting for our state each and every day of my life.
Mr. Blankenship, let's get you in the mix here. When you're asked about the carpetbagger question, you respond that, you know, a lot of people have houses in different states. But Mr. Blankenship, isn't it true that you live in Nevada? You pay taxes in Nevada. And in fact, your probation officer is in Nevada, and yet you're running for U.S. Senate in West Virginia.
Yeah, I paid probably more taxes than anybody on this stage to West Virginia. And if it weren't for me, neither of these two guys would be up here. It's funny that that Pat says the only conservative on the stage. Conservatives weren't even popular in West Virginia until I caused them to be conservative by investing about $5 million of my own money. Honesty, I mean, it's funny to hear politicians talk about honesty. I think that's odd. And as far as a voting record, I voted for the unborn when I've given hundreds of thousands of dollars to Right to Life. That's a real vote. You know, being able to vote or sue on using the state's money or whatever, that's pretty easy to do. It doesn't take any personal sacrifice to do that. I've made a lot of personal sacrifices, if you will, to stop the bond that would have wasted money in West Virginia, to cut your food tax, which has saved all West Virginians a lot of money. Those types of sacrifices where you're a conservative or you take a position that's not popular is what it's going to take to drain the swamp. You can't drain the swamp being like the swamp.
And if Joe Manchin comes after you for living in Nevada, what do you say?
Then he's lived in D.C. too long.
Martha.
Congressman Jenkins, you were a Democrat, and then you were a Republican, and then you were a Democrat again, and then about 5 years ago you became a Republican again. So how do you convince these people who've come tonight and the other Republicans in West Virginia that if there is a blue wave come November and the tide turns again, that you won't flip again?
I am a proud Republican. I'm a proud West Virginia. I've always put my West Virginia values first. You know, Barack Obama devastated our state and our country. He put literally thousands of coal miners out of work. Look at the Democratic platform, supports abortion on demand, gun grabbers limiting our Second Amendment. You know, the West Virginia story is we are a proud red state. Look, in the Republican primary, Donald Trump won West Virginia by 77 points. He won the general by 44 points. Yeah, Donald Trump was a Democrat. Ronald Reagan was a Democrat. It's the people who follow their values and put their values first rather than their party registration. I simply couldn't be a part of a Democratic Party that was so wrong for West Virginia, so wrong for who we are and what we believe. I will always stand up for our state. I will always stand up for our values. So standing up with this president for what we believe, that's an easy choice for me. That's something I'll always do.
So what would you say to the charge that you're too similar, that you're just another Joe Manchin with a little less experience?
I welcome the opportunity to face Joe Manchin in the November primary. I voted to cut the taxes and put more money in people's pockets. Joe Manchin voted no. I voted to defund Planned Parenthood. Joe Manchin voted to fund Planned Parenthood. I voted to reduce the regulations, bringing our West Virginia jobs back. Joe Manchin is on the Chuck Schumer team. He's sitting there with Elizabeth Warren, with Bernie Sanders. He's got a 70–80% voting record with them. That's not West Virginia. I welcome the opportunity to take on Joe Manchin this November and replace him and bring a much-needed Republican vote to the United States Senate.
Mr. Morrissey, you're running as an insurgent Republican, a political outsider, but you worked on Capitol Hill and as a big money lobbyist in D.C. So how are you not a creature of the swamp?
Well, I think it's very clear of all the candidates on the stage, I'm actually the only one with a conservative record of results. And when so many people here on the stage either abandoned the state or they were on the Barack Obama team, I was literally by myself suing Barack Obama because he threatened our way of life here in West Virginia. He came after our coal jobs. I was the only one to stand up. I fought against Barack Obama. We took him all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. We beat him 5-4. That was not an easy thing to do. We built a 27-state coalition to do that. We went after Obama's illegal amnesty. These guys were inactive in all these fights. When West Virginia needed a proven conservative fighter to change the abortion laws in our state, neither of these guys were around. They wouldn't weigh in at the time. I stood up, and now we have a pain-capable law protecting the unborn. That's why West Virginians for Life has endorsed my candidacy. That's why the conservatives have gotten behind me. They know we have a strong conservative record. And we've gone after Washington a lot harder than these guys ever could. You got to put large conservative coalitions together. That's what I've done. These coalitions would look like Hillary and Pelosi and Kerry. That's not the change we need.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General.
Well, the opioid epidemic has hit the country hard, and nowhere harder than here in West Virginia. Here's Rick Leventhal.
Police! It's hard to find anyone who hasn't been touched in some way by the opioid epidemic, killing more Americans every year than car crashes and guns. In 2016, U.S. government statistics show more than 63,000 Americans died from drug overdoses, more than 42,000 of them from opioids. By comparison, roughly 37,000 died in car crashes, 38,000 from gunshots. West Virginia is an unfortunate leader in the opioid crisis with the highest drug overdose rate in the nation, 52 deaths per every 100,000 residents, beating the next closest state by more than 20%, doubling the national average. Last December, the governor called in the National Guard for logistical support in trying to help tackle the epidemic. Last year was the state's worst, with roughly 1,000 people dying from opiate ODs, far surpassing the 884 lives lost in 2016, part of a steady rise of fatalities in West Virginia since the start of this century. One reason for West Virginia's issues is the easy availability of the pills. Between 2007 and 2012, drug wholesalers shipped 780 million hydrocodone and oxycodone pills into the state, which economists estimate cost West Virginia nearly $1 billion in lost productivity and resources to address the issue.
Congressman Jenkins, you have been representing Southern West Virginia for 24 years. Small towns like Kermit and Williamson, both in your district, have been flooded with enough hydrocodone and oxycodone to supply thousands of pills to every man, woman, and child. So what makes you believe that you deserve a promotion when the district that you represent is ground zero for the opioid crisis?
Well, we've been making a real difference, and we are seeing progress. We have here two ladies. They called me 5 years ago, Sarah and Rhonda, two nurses that saw these precious newborn babies that had been drug exposed during pregnancy. And through a labor of love, Rhonda, Sarah, me, and some others started Lily's Place, a facility that Melania Trump actually came and visited, giving every child a healthy start in life. And what I really like about that piece is they're talking about the flood of opioids. Patrick Morsi and his family lobbying firm in Washington, D.C., Cardinal Health. Cardinal, it's not our state bird, it's the pusher of all these pills. He and his family lobbying firm have made millions and millions in his 18 years as a D.C. lobbyist and Hill staffer. They have flooded our state with these pain pills that have devastated people in West Virginia. If you want to see what the problem is, it is the pill pushers. And Patrick Morsi has represented those people for years and made millions.
Our first bell of the evening, but Mr. Morsi.
Well, there Evan goes yet again. He's lies just keeping out. Did your mom ever tell you that we should wash your mouth out with soap with those lies? You know? I'll tell you what. Obviously, not only do people know we didn't work on those issues in the private sector, but no one has done more to go after the opiate epidemic. Suing, going after entities, $78 million in damages from the pharmaceutical companies. Recently, we just went after the DEA because that federal government agency had been blanketing the state. They were rubber stamping the applications coming in, flooding West Virginia with pills. We went after it. We're putting an end to that. Education in the schools, and obviously, we're going after treatment as well because we have to address people's needs in their heads and their hearts. I'll conclude on this note. All of us, including me and my family, we've seen issues with addiction. There's no one here tonight that hasn't felt it. And for someone like Evan Jenkins to cheapen the political dialogue, to say things that are not true, to hide his deep liberal background, I think is very sad.
Mr. Morsi, I understand what you're saying there, but as Attorney General, you did sue this major pill distributor. But at the very same time, your wife was lobbying for that pill distributor. Is that not a conflict of interest?
No. Look, we have handled everything exactly right, and I think most people around the state would say we've been more effective taking on the opiate epidemic than anyone. I would note when I got into office, there was no substance abuse fighting unit in the state. So we've turned things around. The other point, which is important, you cited it. The statistics from 2007 to 2012, well, look, Joe Manchin was on the watch as governor. He was sleeping at the switch when pills were flooding into our state, and it took me and the AG's office to go after that aggressively.
Hey, Brett.
I'm going to get Mr. Blankenship in.
When he came into office, Cardinal Health paid for his inaugural party. They were so happy that Patrick Morsi had won the Attorney General. They knew they had a friend.
All right, quickly, Mr. Morsi,
pay for your inaugural party. Return the money.
He has a pain pill pledge.
Sign my pain pill pledge.
He has a pain pill pledge that's a fraud because he's taken tens of thousands of dollars that he won't return. So this is what we call hypocrisy.
All right,
and Evan, I wish you would stop.
Let's get Mr. Blankenship in here. So you have talked tough on opioids.
In fact, I'd like to address some of what they said.
You will.
Let me ask you the question, and then you can. In fact, you want to drug test everyone from lawmakers to teachers. What about the other side of this issue? Do you have empathy for addicts?
Well, I don't think empathy is going to fix the problem. I think if we stop the drug abuse, we don't need to have empathy, and that's more important. But let me say again that Patrick said he's the only conservative up here. I've already explained that neither one of them would be up here without me. And both of them are misleading. Patrick Morsi came to West Virginia in 2012. He's been here 6 years. Drug abuse deaths have gone up 63%, and they're continuing to be on the rise. They're up 500 and some percent since Evan first went to Charleston. They like to talk about endorsements. Most of Patrick Morsi's endorsements are the same endorsements that Joe Manchin had. You know, Conservatives don't go out and take campaign contributions from Planned Parenthood. And conservatives don't accept money from drug companies that are flooding West Virginia with opiates. So I'll leave it with that.
We have much more ahead, and we will give you plenty of time to respond. We got to take a commercial break very quickly. Coming up, they all said they would drain the swamp, but which one of these candidates would support Senator Mitch McConnell?
We will ask them as the debate continues live in Morgantown, West Virginia. Candidates on the stage are hoping to take on Senator Joe Manchin in November and flip this Senate seat from blue to red. Let's get back to the questions.
Okay, gentlemen, if you would, welcome back. If you would, please raise your hand if you would support Mitch McConnell for Republican leader in the Senate.
He hasn't asked.
Okay, we noted your duck. We noted your duck. We got that.
Yeah, I don't want to have any doubt about it.
Okay, Congressman Jenkins, you're not raising your hand. You've been a beneficiary of groups tied or aligned with the Senate Majority Leader. Why wouldn't you support him?
You know, Mitch McConnell hasn't even asked for my support. I think it's way too premature. I think, candidly, Mitch McConnell deserves a debt of gratitude for being able to hold a Supreme Court seat open so Neil Gorsuch could be on the Supreme Court today. What I'm interested in doing is getting through the November election, bringing a much-needed Republican vote to the United States Senate, and then we're going to see who's running for Senate. I'm not ruling anybody in. I'm not ruling anybody out. Nobody has asked for my support. What I will do is make a decision on who is going to lead the Senate to support the President Trump agenda.
And so I'm noticing you're not raising your hand either.
No, listen, I'm not the product of the liberal establishment. I think that's why you're seeing all the conservatives come out for me. I'm going to make the right decision after we get through the general election. But I'll tell you this, I wasn't the one recruited by the liberal establishment because of his very questionable record. Once again, Obamacare support, cap and trade support, donating to Joe Manchin, holding a fundraiser at his house. That's not the West Virginia values we need to drain the swamp in Washington.
All right. Well, Mr. Morrissey, let me stay with you for a moment.
Mind if I respond?
Go ahead. You can respond.
Yep, go ahead.
Well, thank you. Unfortunately, Patrick Morrissey continues to spew his lies and misrepresentations. And, you know, they said don't bring out any papers. We had PolitiFact, and all the things that Patrick is saying, supporting Hillary, cap and trade, Planned Parenthood, PolitiFact went through each and every allegation and said false, 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 false. And unfortunately, Patrick thinks if you keep saying it time and time and time again, people will think it's true. Patrick Morrissey, PolitiFact, everybody has debunked everything that you've said. You stood next to me and endorsed me 3 years ago and said I was right for West Virginia. What's different now?
Evan, I didn't know that at the time that you were willing to lie so much and as much of your liberal background. I won't make that mistake again.
All right. Moving right along, Mr. Morrissey, on your website, you tout an endorsement from Steve Bannon. President Trump recently
Do I not
said...
get to speak about McConnell?
Recently,
You will.
You will. Mr. Trump recently said when he was fired, he not only lost his job, he lost his mind. That's a quote from President Trump. The last person that Steve Bannon endorsed was Roy Moore. Is this an association that you're proud of?
Listen, I think it's very clear. I said at the time that it happened, when Bannon went after Trump, I thought it was reprehensible. You don't go after family members and a wife. You just don't do that. Those are not West Virginia values. And what I would argue is that we have a broad array of support throughout the conservative spectrum. Senator Ted Cruz, Senator Rand Paul, we have West Virginians for Life. We have all the principal conservative leaders backing my candidacy because they know there's a huge difference between my record going after Obama's overreach and his record, and this is a fact, rallying for Hillary Clinton and working side by side on the Obama team. It took him 5 years to get off the Barack Obama team. That's how opportunism, not principle.
Okay, we're going to get to Mr. Blankenship. Congressman Jenkins, do you want to respond? And who did you vote for in 2008?
I will tell you, I did not vote for Hillary Clinton. I am proud to support the Republican. The problem is they went back and looked, fact-checked, looked at every comment I ever made and said Patrick Morsi is lying. The problem is Patrick Morsi won't look at the camera, won't look at the people of West Virginia and say why he did not vote for Donald Trump for president in the May primary. He is the one who said publicly, Donald Trump wasn't my first choice. Who was your first choice?
Well, let me be clear, and this is a great opportunity. So I'm the only candidate on the stage who not only has voted for Donald Trump at the convention and in the Electoral College. We said we couldn't bring paper up, but I was one of only 5 people in West Virginia to be part of the Electoral College. People that are trusted to support the president get to be in the Electoral College. But Evan Jenkins, we know in 2008, in 2007, actually, he rallied for Hillary Clinton. He supported John Kerry for president. It's a very liberal background. And Evan, you said your philosophy was progressive mainstream back in 2003. What changed with you?
We are going to get...
Who did you vote for in the May primary in West Virginia? I endorsed and voted for Donald Trump. Who did you vote for?
I support the president, and that's why just a few weeks ago, just a few weeks ago when I sat next to the president, and Evan was there as well, that we have a great relationship. We've worked together. I was proud to run ads with the president and support him at the convention. Look, there are a lot of people that were not. Evan supported him the day before the primary. That's no profile in courage.
Okay, Mr. Blankenship, to your wish here.
Can I go ahead and comment about something?
You wanted to talk about Mitch McConnell, didn't you?
I do, but I will go ahead and do that. You want to ask a question?
I do want to ask you a question.
They've talked about it enough that I think I can clarify it.
Okay, let me ask you a question. You know, both of these gentlemen mentioned that we had rules, that you couldn't bring paper, you couldn't bring props. You were going to bring props, and we had to kind of take them away from you. And you had these hats that said "Ditch Mitch." You wanted to wear one of these hats, and it was against the rules. So we said no to that. But you have called the Senate Majority Leader a host of different names, including most recently Cocaine Mitch, a reference to an allegation that drugs were found on a ship in 2014 owned by his father-in-law. So here's the question. If you are elected to the U.S. Senate and Mitch McConnell is the Majority Leader, how will you get anything done for West Virginia?
Well, first of all, he won't be the Majority Leader. But let me clarify that both of these guys are right. They're both lying. Anybody that tells you that they're going to go to Washington, D.C. and drain the swamp and don't know whether they're going to vote for Mitch McConnell or not is not telling you the truth, because McConnell has to go to drain the swamp. When he went to D.C. 35 years ago, the national debt was $2 trillion. And now the national debt is $22 trillion. $20 trillion while Mitch McConnell's been there. He has conflicts of interest with China. His family is very powerful in China and very powerful in the United States. One of the things that President Trump is going to face is economic dealings with China, where they now have a $358 billion surplus over us in trade. And he's also going to face issues about human rights and a whole source of other things. Mitch McConnell was one of the few senators that voted after Tiananmen Square not to have punitive actions against China for human rights violations. They killed 500 to 1,000 people at Tiananmen Square. You have to wonder what he's doing. But if you want something else that you should be able to tell you shouldn't vote for McConnell, he interferes with elections all over this country. He's interfering with this election. How are these guys going to stand up when McConnell tells them to sit down, like when Schumer tells Manchin to sit down, when they're going to be beholding to him for having elected him? The reason that Schumer and McConnell have so much power is they control these super PACs. And it's these super PACs that these guys are afraid of, and that's what Joe Manchin probably means when he says that Schumer's too powerful. McConnell's no different. If they tell you that they're going to drain the swamp, but they don't know if they're going to vote for McConnell or not, can't be true.
Mr. Blankenship, let me just clarify here. Let me just clarify. When you're talking about Mitch McConnell's family, you're talking about the father of the current Secretary of Transportation, President Trump's Secretary of Transportation, Elaine Chao, the father who you called a China person. She is a key decider in infrastructure projects, which might be a big deal in West Virginia. How do you get along and get things done by slinging insults like that?
I'm not going to D.C. to get along, so that won't be a failure because I don't intend to get along. I intend to make sure that we make a difference. You know, this idea that calling somebody a China person, I mean, I'm an American person. I don't see this insinuation by the press that there's something racist about saying a China person. Some people are Korean persons and some of them are African persons. It's not any slander there. But both families are very powerful in both countries. I've previously been on the board of 4 or 5 major corporations. You do not send family members out to negotiate purchases and deals with other family members. It's called a conflict of interest.
All right. We want to get a quick answer, if we can, from each one of you on this. Right now, there is a bipartisan bill in Congress to prevent the president from being able to fire Robert Mueller, the special counsel, in the investigation. In other words, should the president have the right to fire the special counsel? Mr. Morrissey first.
Well, first of all, the president is the head of the executive branch, and I do think he has a lot of say over who is in his Justice Department. With respect to the Mueller investigation, I think it needs to come to an end. It's a witch hunt.
Do you think the president should fire Robert Mueller?
Look, I think this should come to an end. If it came to an end very quickly, then we wouldn't have to deal with all this endless string of accusations. It's distracting to the president. The president has done a lot of really good things for West Virginia and our country, deregulating the economy, good Supreme Court justice. He's doing a lot of positive things. I think that's a sideshow, and it should come to an end.
Mr. Jenkins, bipartisan group that got together, they would like to restrict the president on this. What do you say?
I am very clear. End this investigation now. I've seen the documents. I've seen Comey's outrageous leaks. I have seen the witch hunt that has gone after this administration. The Democrats can't give up on the results of 2016. They're fighting this administration each and every day. End this investigation now.
Mr. Blankenship?
Well, you know, I've had a little personal experience with the Department of Justice. They lie a lot too. So, you know, it's one of those things where when you know what really goes on in the Department of Justice, you wonder where this country's going. It's really crazy. It's a Mueller investigation sitting in, but hopefully it'll be ended before I get there in January, so it should be okay.
To everyone on the stage here, ask a question to everyone. This is on the issue of coal. Senator Manchin is working with the Trump administration, trying to protect the coal industry by invoking a national security law, decades old, much like they've done for the steel and aluminum industries. Do you agree with Senator Manchin on that? Mr. Blankenship.
On the tariffs, is that what you...
This is on trying to protect the coal industry using that same law.
Yeah, I think that protection has to be used very carefully. I do agree with it in this case because I think that, you know, that we've got so many products coming in the U.S., whether it's steel, coal, whatever. We've got products that are being produced with, you know, human rights violations, with people that aren't being paid. And to a great extent, this country has, you know, been a victim of that. All the workers in the United States have been victims of the fact that we're buying stuff from overseas, and those purchases do not pay any taxes for the roads. They do not pay any taxes for Social Security. They do not pay any taxes for your medical care. So when you buy that product, it looks inexpensive, but it's actually very, very expensive because if those products were being made by American workers, they would be paying taxes that would help balance the budget, help provide medical care, help get people off the street, help fix the opioid epidemic. But it's a very dangerous, slippery slope to go down, and it needs to be done analytically, and it needs to be a situation where all 132 countries are looked at in terms of human rights violations, environmental stewardship, and whatever else you want to consider. And then the products need to be looked at individually, and we need to tax the products that we can make cost effectively here and provide American jobs.
Mr. Morrissey, same question on the coal specifically, using the national security law.
Look, I think we need to do everything imaginable to bring coal back. And here's what happened over the last 8 years. Under Barack Obama, he had an absolute assault on coal miners' jobs. And when I got in 2013, I sued the EPA. By 2016, we had that historic Supreme Court win stopping President Obama's top initiative in court. That was a big win. We saved thousands of coal miner jobs. But a lot of damage was done by the Obama administration. They basically tried to force compliance with the utilities, to force utilities to close down, stop burning as much coal. So I do think, whether it's looking at issues of national security or my recent proposal, which is going to jury rig, spit up the amount of met coal production in our country by relieving them of some of the regulatory burdens in place at the EPA, we should do all of the above to make sure that West Virginia has a chance to recoup, because it was a war on West Virginia.
Well, let me ask you this just quickly. If you did that, how does that match up with your small, conservative values, smaller government? What you're suggesting here, do you think Senator Cruz or Senator Paul would be for doing what you're proposing?
Well, I think that all this is consistent with getting back to a place when Barack Obama says he's going to put a whole industry and coal miners out of business. All we're trying to do is get back to some level playing field to be able to allow coal miners to mine again. So I think it takes ensuring that there will be markets. I'm the most free market-oriented guy here on the stage. But I would say this, when you have damage that's inflicted that's so severe, you have to look at different ways that you can mine and sell coal again.
Congressman Jenkins, same question.
I think you're giving Joe Manchin way too much credit. You're repeating exactly what Joe would like you to think.
You don't think he's working with the Trump administration?
The problem is Joe's not a fighter for coal. He says one thing and he does another. Joe Manchin supported Barack Obama. Joe Manchin fought hard to elect Hillary Clinton. He is causing our pain. He might like to think he feels the pain. Joe Manchin has it wrong. I stood there in the White House with President Trump where he signed the piece of legislation I authored, the lead sponsor of, that saved 1/3 of all the coal mining jobs in America. That's making a difference, and we already see the results with less regulations. Jobs are coming back. It's unbelievable. Patrick Morrissey talking about your limited government, he took a pledge and a campaign to eliminate the Department of Energy. We're in Morgantown, West Virginia, hundreds of jobs right here under the Department of Energy to find a future for coal. We don't need to eliminate the Department of Energy. We need to find a coal future. These are important jobs.
We've got to head to break here.
If I can, very briefly, I find it very rich that the person who just voted for the big pork omnibus, $1.3 trillion, has the gall to talk about smaller government. I'm the only proven conservative in this race. We've gone after spending, voluntarily returned a lot of money back to the Treasury here in West Virginia. So a lot of inconsistency, my friend.
Patrick, I eliminated $500 million from the budget of the EPA. I have cut the cost and size of government. You want to do away with the Department of Energy, the DOE jobs here, or creating a future for West Virginia coal miners.
We got to leave it there. We got to take a break. Hold on. Coming up next, we'll be back with the lightning round from West Virginia and Morgantown. Great night. We'll be right back after this break.
I want to go back to the one I love, where the skies are blue and you'll always be home sweet home to me. Good old Morgantown,
Rocky Top.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Metropolitan Theater in Morgantown, West Virginia. Now we have a lightning round. These are going to be 30-second answers, and the first one is for Congressman Jenkins. After Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu laid out evidence of Iran's lying about the nuclear deal, if you had a decision as U.S. Senator, would you vote to end that deal, or do you think it's wiser to continue it?
I want to take a brief second. Playing Rocky Top for Tennessee and West Virginia. It's country roads here, folks, not Rocky Top.
Yeah.
Duly noted. Duly noted.
Duly noted.
You know, we're proud West Virginians. You know, we get put down so many times. People make fun of us. So that's what my candidacy, what my life has been about, standing up for who we are and what we believe. So sorry to jump in. It's about West Virginia. It's West Virginia pride.
Okay. Now, what about Iran?
You know what? The Iran nuclear deal was a disaster. The idea that we've got pallets of cash being shipped to Iran, Barack Obama made a disastrous deal. We've got a deadline coming up. Donald Trump should end the Iran deal.
So even though the head of the leadership in Iran has said that they would instantly restart their nuclear program if that deal were ended, you're okay with that?
You know, I respect the state of Israel. I have been with Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem. I understand the forces of evil that are all around Jerusalem. The state of Israel is absolutely essential. We support them. We defend them. But the idea that Iran and their nuclear program, it was a terrible deal. It needs to be ended. We need to go back and negotiate a better deal that will protect the world.
Mr. Blankenship, President Trump has talked about getting U.S. troops out of Syria. He also, though, after meeting with the French President Macron, talked about possibly having them stay for some time. What's the right choice?
I don't think anybody up here knows what the right choice is, because you got to know a lot more than we know. But I don't agree with going around the world and putting ourselves in harm's way for when enemies are fighting one another. But back to the Department of Energy, there's 19,000 of them, or somebody told me it was. I never met one. I produce more energy than anybody in the history of this area. So it doesn't make any sense. So I'd be for cutting the Department of Energy to about 200 people and getting rid of about 18,800.
Attorney General Morsi, #1 threat facing the U.S.
I think we have to go back and look. President Trump has very adroitly handled ISIS, and I think what's going on in the Middle East remains a powder keg. But North Korea, I still am very distrustful of what's going on between North Korea and South Korea. I commend the president, though, because his tough talk has actually gotten us to a place, perhaps, under this president, we're not going to have a repeat of the failure of Bill Clinton back in the 1990s and all the other administrations that were led astray when North Korea promised they weren't going to develop their nuclear program. President Trump deserves credit for that, but we have to watch it very, very closely.
I want to ask each of you to give me a 30-second answer on this if you can. The national debt is now over $21 trillion and growing. Fiscal conservatives say that the problem cannot be solved unless we begin to reform entitlements. Senator Manchin has said he will protect all entitlements. Would you accept any changes to Social Security, to Medicaid, to Medicare? I'll take it first, Mr. Blankenship.
Well, it's pretty simple. You have to. The Republican Study Committee has come up with something that looks very good to me at a distance. You know, the big thing that has to happen is we have to have fewer people on welfare. Some of you may remember Reagan's words that we shouldn't judge our success by how many people are on welfare, but how few people need it. And that's the real answer. And we're going to have to put people to work. What that Republican study says is that, you know, people should have to work even if they're on welfare, if they're able to work. They should be drug tested, of course. And those things will make a difference. It's not that hard. You know, it's just a matter of whether you've got the resolve to do it. It's apparent to me these two guys don't.
Congressman Jenkins, would you do that? Would you put people, are you going to institute a work requirement for Medicaid or for Social Security in West Virginia?
We've actually authorized at the federal level the ability for states to be incubators of innovation. The idea of imposing work requirements absolutely is a good idea. Let me talk to the West Virginia seniors. Medicare, Social Security, they should absolutely be protected. We should not privatize. We need to honor the promise for our seniors that we have made. But look, we just were able to cut the largest amount of taxes in U.S. history. We cut over $1 billion. I am a believer that a good job solves a lot of problems. You put more money in people's pockets, not the government's pockets, get them back to work. We can grow the budget and take care of our seniors. It's a promise I won't walk away from.
Mr. Morsi, would you cut Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare?
Well, I think it's critical that we absolutely keep our promise to our seniors. Now, that has to be a top priority here in West Virginia. So many people relying on those benefits. But I will note, We can do a lot more as a country and a state to go after fraud, waste, and abuse. In my office alone, we created a disability fraud unit that saved $10 million in a little over 2 years. I think we can go after Medicaid fraud. There's literally tens of millions of dollars lying around. Same in Medicare. That's my background. I'll go after it. I won't be afraid of the D.C. establishment. We'll make the changes to protect people's benefits, but ultimately ensure that we rid out the waste, fraud, and abuse.
Each candidate will now make a brief closing statement. We're doing this in reverse order. We begin with Mr. Blankenship.
What I would say is I'm up here with two guys that's never created a job, and jobs in West Virginia are the most important thing. I'm up here with two guys that one of which oversees the worst district in the nation for drug abuse deaths, and the other one lobbies for and works with and has friends that work for the drug companies that cause that. I'm up here with guys that get money from Planned Parenthood or perhaps have voted for funding of Planned Parenthood, and yet I've given $200,000 to Right to Life to protect the unborn. So they're not going to fix that problem. And on human rights violations, whether it be the Second Amendment or any of the amendments, I'm more conscious of how fragile they are and how badly they need to be protected.
Mr. Morrissey.
Ladies and gentlemen, there is one proven conservative fighter in this race. During the time when Barack Obama was wreaking havoc on our way of life, I stood up, I sued Barack Obama, we won, and we protected West Virginia jobs. When it comes to the important questions of the day, West Virginians for Life has stood strong with me because I'm the pro-life fighter, fought off the abortionist, who other people get to work with for long parts of their career. We can make a difference, and I'd ask you to think of one final thing. We need a proven conservative to take on Joe Manchin, who's not the same on all the issues. I'm the only credible conservative on this stage.
Mr. Jenkins.
Well, thank you so much, showcasing West Virginia. I'm a proud West Virginian, married a West Virginia girl, raised 3 children, and my oldest son is serving our country in the United States Marines. It's who we are. It's service. I proudly endorse Donald Trump, working with him each and every step of the way. Patrick was a never-Trumper. He's surrounded by never-Trumpers. We need somebody who will support our president, stand up for what we believe. I have a 100% voting record with the National Right to Life and a 100% voting record and an A+ rating with the NRA. Proud West Virginian. We're going to take out Joe Manchin this November. I'd be honored to have your vote.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. That concludes our debate tonight. Very interesting. The night is just beginning.
Indeed it is.